Brendan Brown, Chief Economist at Mitsubishi Securities. Hi, Brendan.
Hello.
If you're a Portuguese homeowner, you've got a variable rate mortgage. If you're an Irish homeowner with flexible rates, or a Spanish homeowner with more of the same, can you cope with a 25 basis point interest rate increase?
Well, that in itself is probably only going to affect the marginal householder, so that's not the big event. But what we have to look at is the further 1% rise in rates, which is discounted in the interest rate curve. So if we get another 1% by December, which is what the markets are saying, that really is beginning to be significant. And it's not just householders, but a whole range of commercial borrowers too.
2.25% is what markets are saying by next year. I mean, if you were on the ECB, would you be voting for a hike today or not?
Yes, I mean, we are looking really at a normalization of rates. We had a severe recession in Europe. The GDP in the core Europe is now back or above the level it was at the peak of the last cycle, so it's reasonable that rates should be normalizing. Plus we have this huge commodity bubble out there, which is mainly being fed by China and the United States, but Europe is a reserve currency, and to have some normalization there will help also.
But a normalization, yes, up 25 basis points. What's the outlook? I mean, does Trichet say today, that's it? How does he play the future? How does he forewarn us about his future intentions?
I would think he would talk very much about normalization, which leaves the door open to further rises, but he will also talk about inflation expectations, because what the ECB is concerned about, as the old Bundesbank was concerned about, is whether these commodity price hikes feed through into some sort of raised inflation expectations, which may affect wage rates and the whole inflation outlook. That's a very difficult one to call, and commodity inflation is not like ordinary inflation, it's more like an asset price inflation phenomenon. And of course the commodity bubble can burst, and then there won't be any need for further tightening.
So why is he raising rates and Mervyn King isn't?
Well, I would think the attitude of the UK monetary authorities, and of course Mr. Bernanke, is that the commodity bubble will probably burst of its own accord before it affects inflation expectations, so there's no reason to go ahead with monetary tightening.
Do you agree with that?
I don't agree with that at all. I think that the US monetary policy is a key factor in creating the monetary bubble, the commodity bubble.
Money
and
into
the best way of breaking that commodity bubble would be to have some tightening of monetary policy in the US, and that would benefit everyone, including the US consumer.
We had a slight change in rhetoric, didn't we, from the Fed in their minutes? Some wanting possibly a tightening of credit conditions. Are we sensing a changing in tone from the Fed or not?
You've basically got these two camps. You've got the Bernankeite triumvirate, which is most powerful, which doesn't want to raise rates at all at this point. Then you've got the 3 or 4 regional Feds who are more concerned about asset price inflation and commodity inflation. I think where you may get some budge from the Bernankeites, including Professor Bernanke himself, is if you see some evidence of rising inflation expectations, as highlighted in the inflation-protected bond market or in consumer sentiment surveys. If these inflation expectations begin to rise, then I would expect to see some action.
We started with the Eurozone, Brendan. Let's finish with it. Portugal, of course, the big story in town today. Yes, it was highly anticipated. Many are now drawing a line in the sand, saying that's it, no more bailouts for anybody else. Do you agree?
Well, I would come back to Professor Weber having left the ECB, and he was very much against just expanding the ECB's balance sheet to take on all the bad debts from all the European weak banks. I think what we're seeing here is that the ECB now is going to be operating more and more as a bad bank, essentially lending to the weak banks, particularly in the periphery, to stem capital flight. And the big question out there is if this moves to Spain, and I'm not sanguine there, I think it may very well move to Spain, will the ECB come in an unlimited fashion and lend if need be?
That's the big question, Brendan. Thanks very much indeed. Brendan Brown there from Mitsubishi UFJ.